Hello, everybody. I am Mykhailo Videiko, Chief of Department of Archaeology and Prehistory of Kyiv Boris Grinchenko University. I am studying Trypillia culture last 50 years. It's times of so-called civilization of old Europe. It means about history of European continent 5,000 years ago. And the main topic of my today's speech is rediscovery of Trypillia culture. What means rediscovery? This culture, archaeological culture, was discovered at the beginning of 20th century. It means more than 100 years ago. And during this time, a few generations of scientists studied it in few countries. Were published more than 200 books and a few thousand of scientific articles in which described some story of this culture, some discoveries, and a lot of materials. And it published in 10 languages. So mostly in Russian or Ukrainian or Romanian, Moldavian, but maybe 300 or 500 articles from this amount and books were published in German, English, French, and other languages. So it's available for everybody who wish to know something about it. And for a long time, we thinking that we know about these times, about this culture, everything. But today I will try to show what's happened last 10 years. Only 10 years of studies changed the image of this archaeological culture and image of history of the times of old Europe. Now I will try to share my presentation, the rediscovery of Trypillia culture. And what I saw that 10 years ago, it seems that we know everything about Trypillia culture, and everything has been discovered for a long time. After that, ancient temples, large fortified settlements, pottery kilns were found. Research using the methods of natural science has provided unique information about the genetics of ancient population, its food and technologies of those times. Together, this changed the perception of ancient history of Europe and the world too. Maybe most of you are familiar with Maria Gimbuta's book, Civilization of the Goddess. It's about old Europe. And on this map, it's from this book, you can see rows is marked by arrow where our Trypillia culture is located 5,000 years ago, and you see that it is the part of old Europe. It covers part of areas of three contemporary European countries: Romania, Moldova, and Ukraine. On this area, what we know more than 4,500 sites which existed between 5,000 years BC up to 3,000 years BC. And 2,500 from the sites are at the area territory of Ukraine. And from the very beginning, Maria Gimbutas took into account new archaeological discoveries from the 70th years of 20th century, namely information about the huge size of Trypillia culture. They marked as one of the peaks reached by civilization of old Europe. So it's an early step of urbanization. On this slide, you can see large plans of large site Maidanetska, which were produced by magnetic prospection and aerial survey between 70-74. And after it, were many excavations, they were explored for 20 years, and these explorations continued for a long time. And two words about how looked old Europe before the times of Trypillia culture. You know that Neolithic in Europe started from Balkans, and then it moves to north up to Baltic Sea, and it continued around 1,000 years. But the main center of old Europe, usually it was Central Europe, Balkans, Greece. It was the epicenter of this civilization of old Europe between 5,000 4,200 BC. But also were a few other areas they marked on this map in which something started. And after collapse of Balkan civilizations around 4200 BC, it's some dramatic climate changes happened, which looked like European climate changing now. Only one area continued it developed in some way, and also different areas started progress in the development of culture, crafts, system of science, and everything. Among these three centers where development was continued was the area of Trypillia culture. You see it on this map. And how Trypillia looked at this time. We're talking about Trypillia culture, but really this was archaeological culture which existed more than 2000 years. It means it contains into this culture we can see different local types. Now we know about more than 70 local types. In each phase coexisted from 8 to 11 groups, and each group, as we know now, had one or few centers of power, large size from 50 to 300 hectares. You saw a plan of Maidanesk. It's sample of such a center in area between Dnieper and southern Buk. It means that's at central Ukraine now. It located. How it looking on map? You see dots white or yellow, and blue. It's these centers. Black, it's small size. Oh, it's example for stage B2, but it's around 4,000 years BC. But in different times before it and after it, a few hundred years, the situation was similar with these centers of power. Such mega settlements were economic, military, spiritual, and political centers surrounded both smaller sites. In general, we can talk about a fundamentally new type of social organization in its various manifestations. And what's happened after 11? After 11, it started a program of international studies of these mega sites. The first were scientists from United Kingdom, from Durham University. We started this project with John Chapman from Durham University. It was a site of Nebelivka. You can see it to right, and with specialists from Deutsche Archaeological Institute and Kiel University, Knut Rassmann and Johannes Müller is from Germany. We started to study Maidanesk. It's to left. Nebelivka project is continued to 14 Maidanesk projects. We have big plans for these sites, and we try to continue it. For example, this year we have plans in March to finish magnetic prospection and to start in August excavations of a temple. You can see it on this map. It's a red big temple. Why it's important, I will tell you later about these kinds. What new we discovered during these 10 years on this site? As I say, we discovered fortifications around this site. You see it's a traces of a palisade around Nebelivka, 8 kilometers of palisade. You can imagine this size of the site is around 2.5 square kilometers. And in Maidanesk plan, you can see 2 lines of defense. It means 2 lines of this palisade. And it's also around 7 kilometers in diameter. Its site size is 2 square kilometers, 200 hectares. And old plan, which was produced in 70s, we had 1,500 remains of houses. But on this new plan, we had around 3,000 of houses. It means that the population in this site was 2 times more than we considered before it, because the most of houses were contemporary. In Nebelivka were 1,500 remains of houses discovered, and it means that this site had a large square, but population 2 times less than in Maidanesk. And what's interesting, Nebelivka existed near 5,000 BC, Maidanesk between 3,700, 3,600 or 500 BC. And Maidanetska existed for a long time, 200 years. Before it, we considered that such sites existed not more than 50, 70 years, but now, after excavations and magnetic prospections and C14 dating, we can reconstruct history of one site, Maidanetska, during 200 years. It's something new for archaeology of this large site. And Nebelivka existed not too long, around 100, 120 years, not more, but also is not too large period. What about fortifications? In Nebelivka and Maidanetska, we explored these traces of ditches. We considered before excavations that it were ditches. But during excavation, we saw that they had these ditches, so-called ditches, they have depths less than 1 meter. So it's not a real ditch. In profile, they were not more than 1 meter, 1.5 meter wide. You saw this on picture. So it's other kind of fortifications. It's were palisades, but they were very, very long. And it seems that it was enough to protect such site. We tried to calculate how many trees they must cut to create such fortifications. In case of Nebelivka, you can imagine where around 20,000 of trees were used to build it. So it's a large scale project for period 4,000 years BC. And then another discovery, it's remains of pottery kilns. They were well visible on magnetic prospections as a big anomalies. And in Nebelivka were discovered around 50 remains of kilns. In Maidanetska, more than 100. In Talianki, it's the largest site, 3.5 square kilometers, 150 remains of kilns. So each part of such big sites, they have own workshops which produced in a big amount this pottery. Why this discovery is too important? You see on this picture that it's a kiln with 3 channels. What's interesting that such multi-channel kilns before these excavations were known only starting from Bronze Age, only from the 2nd millennium BC on islands in Mediterranean, on Crete, for example. It means that such kind of kilns appeared in Europe 2,000 years before we considered it, and it's equipment for professional producing of pottery in large amount. We calculated that during the life of one house, in one moment, in each house was in use from 30 to 50 vessels. And you can imagine if this house existed 30, 40, 50 years, they must replace it. And we take this calculation that only in Maidanetska were produced more from 2 to 4 millions of pots during the life of different kinds of vessels during the life of these sites. So it means that it was a large-scale production of pottery, and we remember that it was 6,000 years before. Here is a plan of such pottery kiln from Maidanetska explored in 14, and you see reconstruction. What's interesting, this kiln was repaired 3 times, and they changed the construction of it, so orientation. In one moment it was oriented to south, and next moment to east, and they combined different sizes of elements of these kilns, and it was many times repaired. So it was a kind of engineering, as we can say, and this construction was common for the big area. It's interesting then in Trypillia area, we know such kilns not only in the region of Talianki, Maidanetska, we know such kilns in Volhynia, it's far to west. It means that in few groups of Trypillia, they were familiar with such kind of equipment, and they produced this nice painted pottery using these kilns. Another impressive event was the discovery of public or communal buildings or temples At first, it's started from magnetic prospection, of course, on which we saw some constructions which were larger than usual houses. And now we have, thanks to these magnetic prospections, have a catalog of more than 120 such buildings on different sites. What's interesting, they usually, the largest of them usually are at the eastern part of the site, and they oriented to exactly to east. One of such large houses, you see it 60 meters long and 20 meters wide. Probably it was the largest building in Europe 6,000 years BC. It was explored in Nebelivka in 12 by British Ukrainian team. And to the right of this photo, which not from drone, the same structures from magnetic prospection from different sites of Maidanetsk and different other different sites. And here it's a reconstruction how probably looks this Nebelivka temple. It's a two-story building with a big yard, and it's an altar which was on the first floor. It's interesting that were 7 such objects inside. The largest was more than 4 meters in diameter, and it's a decoration from one of these altars. What's interesting, it was like a plan how to organize a painting of pottery. It's a scheme of decoration of pottery. It was used in such a way. So it's you see this place on plan where it's an eastern part. It was oriented exactly on sunrise on June 22. And the altar, we take it to museum, and it's a part of the wall painting. First time we discovered that really these temples and usual houses, they had wall painting. It's not simple paint, but with some elements. Probably something was painted on these walls. And exploration of this house, large houses, it's only started. Now we explored one smaller temple of communal building in Maidanetsk with German team, and it looks it was some system of temples or communal buildings on this site. And here it's a reconstruction. Probably each some small temple had own zone which belonged to it, and people come exactly to this temple. But on the largest holidays, probably they can visit the largest temple. What's interesting that around this large temple, it was a square on which it was possible to gather more than 5,000 people, and 1,000 can be inside this large house. And probably the system of this temple, it's reflected some social system of this mega site proto-city community. It was for us it's an interesting discovery. What we can say now that Trypillia culture is only part of the big picture of this times of urbanization, which started from the beginning of agriculture. You can see these centers of urbanization of where such large sites appeared. So Trypillia, it's what not some phenomenon as somebody considered before, but it's a part of a big process, big event which started at different farming societies in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, from Egypt to Northern Europe, and from Balkans to Indus to Mohenjo-Daro. And then, for reading. A lot of materials from these excavations were published, and now you can see books. It's a collective monographs or by some scientists who took part in our projects. So Trypillia megasites in European prehistory, early urbanism in Europe, Maidanetsk, it's a PhD by René Ulrau from Kiel. And now, thank you for your attention, and I'm waiting for your questions.
What is about the burial rite and burial sites of Trypillia now?
With burial sites, we have some problems because for many years, scientists looking mainly for sites, not for burial objects. And now I think that we need some new projects to discover this. For this moment, we know about 1,000 of burials. Sometimes they're in cemeteries, mainly from the latest period. Yes, it's a problem from archaeological point of view how to discover this object. And most of objects which we know, they were discovered, for example, during some rescue excavations or some building activities in different areas during after the Second World War, of course. And now we have a big chance for discoveries.
Yeah, let's hope we'll have some new archaeological advantages afterwards. Okay, thank you very much. So maybe if any other question arrives.
Were Trypillians peaceful? Of course, not too peaceful as we consider. You see these fortifications 8 kilometers long. Yes, it means that life was not too peaceful. They need to spend some resources for defense. And for other hand, we know a lot of finds of weapons from this period, and it's not a simple stone or flint weapons. It's axes, daggers produced from copper. So it was a military society, and the situation with this mega sites, it means that not was okay with the relations between different tribes inside Trypillia culture. But they were too numerous. It's what it seems what's no danger from outside. For example, at the beginning of 4th millennium BC, amount of Trypillians in this area was around from 500,000 up to 1 million. Amount of population in steppe zone was around 20,000 people. You know, see, this demographic situation was quite different. Farmers against hunters-gatherers. Usually, it's hunters-gatherers had any chance as everywhere in history.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for that. I've definitely learned a lot about Trypillian culture there. All right.